Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your boy Izzy, and we are going to review the games that took place this weekend. We are going to start off with Luton Town against Tottenham. Now, Luton Town are a team that are new into the league, and they are kind of struggling for points at the moment. And they're facing a Tottenham side very buoyed by their new manager, Ange Postecoglou. A lot of talk around the town has been, are Tottenham possibly title contenders? I think it's far too early, especially in the project that Ange Postecoglou is under. He is trying to still reestablish his team without the aid of Harry Kane, who just recently went to Bayern Munich. I think that this game was going to always be tailor-made for Tottenham Hotspur, and the fact that they went down to 10 men and were still able to win this game, although with some harrowing moments towards the end, spoke volumes about how the quality that Ange Postecoglou has to call on has been performing lately. Now, my prediction for this game was a 2-0 comfortable win for Tottenham. It ended up being a 1-0 win, but we can see why Ange Postecoglou is so successful because of the interplay that his team has in the midfield and a very strong defensive solidity. Their resolve was very good, especially after Yves Bissouma got his marching orders for a dive that was worthy of a Phelps moment. Luton probably need to make their defensive resolve a lot better because in a game which they probably should have pressed Tottenham better in the second half with a man advantage, they're not going to get these many types of opportunities to play against 10 men. They also had the same opportunity against Wolves, and they didn't take advantage of that. So a 1-0 loss was probably the fine result based on the fact that Tottenham were the better side. Even when they went down to 10 men, Luton did have a few chances which they did not take advantage of, but so is the game of football. You have to be able to put the ball in the back of the net, and they should have been braver when they were facing 10 men. So 1-0 was for Tottenham. As far as their title contention, I think it's still far too early. Judge this probably after about 18, 19, or 20 games. Next up was Fulham against Sheffield United. This game I predicted to be a 1-1 draw, ended up being a 3-1 victory for Fulham, which was pretty much deserved. Sheffield United have had a problem recently with scoring goals. The confidence in the team is very low, and I thought that this was a type of game against a mid-table side where they might be able to at least try and get a point. It didn't work out, however. Fulham were very good in the second half of this game. Cordova-Reid and Willian were very good, and Kearney also chipping in with a goal. The problem with Fulham is that they don't have enough consistency based off of the results. They had a couple of good results, for example, against Arsenal, where they showed a very good resolve to get back into the game. And then they have certain games where they were just completely out of it. So as far as this game is concerned, Sheffield United have a lot to do. The survival is going to be extremely hard for them, but this is the type of game that I think Fulham showed why they are a comfortable mid-table side because of their very good second half performance. They are going to struggle against certain teams that they face. For example, if they're to face, say, a Brentford or another team that is somewhere there in mid-table with them because they struggle to break down opponents. But Sheffield United was the type of team you want to face who are low in confidence, and a 3-1 victory did not flatter Fulham. And then next, the revival that is happening at Chelsea. They beat Burnley 4-1 at Turf Moor. This victory was very impressive in the fact that they went down very early on in the game. And usually Chelsea, especially recently, once they go 1-0 down, you kind of are afraid for them and you don't know exactly what Chelsea side is going to respond. The Chelsea side that we saw this weekend was one that seems to be growing in confidence. And with each and every result they get, every win that they're able to attain, we start to see a squad that is now improving as far as their team chemistry and their cohesion. Now, Chelsea have faced a couple of very decent sides. They are now going to go and face a lot of very good sides. Their run after the international break is going to be horrendous, starting off with my team, Arsenal. So they will need to carry this form into that game. They play at home, and their recent home record against Arsenal is surprisingly not good. So if they want to see any tangible progression, they will need to keep at least the same formation or tactics that they have been able to employ over the last couple of games, or else they risk facing a couple of devastating losses and quite possibly still staying mid-table. As far as Burnley, not a lot can be said about them other than the fact that they seem to be very stubborn in trying to approach a lot of the games the same way that they have been trying to approach the earlier part of the season. Their fixtures can be forgivable because they have now faced Manchester City, they have faced Newcastle, they have faced Chelsea, teams that you would historically and normally expect them to lose to. And so as far as them getting over the hump, they will need some more fixtures like they had against Luton, where they can face a side that they can compete with as far as quality wise. But in this game, they were far off the pace, especially once the second half came in and Chelsea just grew in stature as the match went on. So a 4-1 victory. I had predicted a 2-1 victory because Burnley usually do not have much of the measure against Chelsea. I do believe they've only beaten them once in the recent Premier League history. And so this game was tailor-made for Chelsea, and they proved it on the pitch. And then next up, another team that has been in crisis, and one that was probably teetering on full-blown oblivion. Manchester United were able to avert that crisis by beating Brentford with 2 very late McTominay goals. Now, McTominay had come onto the pitch after 87 minutes, and this is a Manchester United Academy graduate, somebody who understands the club in and out, and somebody who probably has a point to prove to Erik ten Hag because he has not been selected regularly for this Manchester United team so far this season. As far as Brentford, they did give a very, very good account of themselves, and they will count themselves very unlucky to lose this game, especially in the manner that they did. Manchester United, on the other hand, are just relieved to win a football game at Old Trafford, and it didn't matter how the victory came through. It didn't matter who scored. It just mattered that they got over the line. And sometimes these emotional victories where a side scores very late into the game, they can go both ways. So we saw an Arsenal last season who were able to beat Bournemouth 3-2, but that was kind of a precursor to an Arsenal side that was going to start conceding more goals and eventually would fall away from the title ever so slightly. But for Manchester United, they just wanted at least something positive before the international break, because when the media and a lot of pundits start clamoring for storylines, they will grasp one of these, which is Manchester United's poor form and the fact that they would have potentially lost 3 straight home games. And for a club of the stature of Manchester United, you do not want these types of topics lingering in the media for too long, because they will start to affect the mentality around the squad. And we already know how hazy most of the fan base is when it comes to the ownership of the Glazers and a lot of the conjecture that is surrounding this potential takeover, whether it's going to be Sir Jim Ratcliffe or whether it's going to be the Qatari-based group. So Manchester United need to get their house in order, but one of the most important things they needed to do was just seal a victory, and it didn't matter how it came through. It eventually did, thanks to McTominay, but Brentford can be very hard done by in this game simply because they gave a good account of themselves, but they just weren't able to keep their concentration for the full 90 minutes. And that's how football goes. You lose concentration just for a little bit. A side like Manchester United, who still do have the quality within their ranks, despite everything that's gone on in their team so far, they still have enough quality to punish you. And that's exactly what happened with those 2 late McTominay goals. Next, we have Everton, who managed to beat Bournemouth 3-0. Now, I predicted this game to be a 1-1 draw, I believe, and I have been wavering with my confidence as far as Everton goes, because one day they will give you a decent performance, and then the next 3 or 4 games they will be absolutely shocking. But in this game, they managed to hold their own very well against the Bournemouth side, and they were on the front foot for pretty much most of the game. The one worry that I do have for them is that this Jekyll and Hyde performance that they've been showing of late might come to cost them, especially when you have a run of games that are going to be extremely hard. As far as Bournemouth, I'm scared for them. And Andoni Iraola needs to find a much better system than what he's been employing, because despite some decent performances, they are now firmly in that bottom 3. As far as whether I think they will end up being bottom 3, Bournemouth is always one of those teams that seem to be able to get results when they need to. And I do have some hope for them, because I do think that the 3 promoted sides are slightly worse than Bournemouth are. But in this early part of the season, they need results. And the fact that they still haven't grabbed 3 points at all is going to be very worrying for a manager who's now on the chopping block. I said on my preview on Friday that I do think that Iraola is probably going to be the first manager to get the sack. I do think that they need to find some consistency in their play. They do seem to have a settled starting 11 for the most part, but whether it's the opposition they faced or the fact that their tactics don't seem to mesh well with the way the gameplay is going, they don't have a lot of good in-game tactics. I don't see much in the way of them changing the flow of most of these games. For example, when Liverpool went down to 10 men, that should have been an opportunity for Bournemouth to try and attack them more, and I didn't really see that. Liverpool won that game comfortably with 10 men, and that should not be the case for a lot of these teams. You should be able to at least give it a go. Something like what Luton did against Tottenham, where the opposition is better than you, but you still have to give it a go because you never know what happens. If you want to win the lottery, you have to buy the raffle ticket. So Everton are doing okay as far as what they need to do. This is their second victory of the season. And I do think that Everton are probably going to survive because there are much worse Premier League teams at the moment. Thereafter, we have Crystal Palace against Nottingham Forest. I predicted Nottingham Forest to come through in this game 2-1, but it ended up being a 0-0 draw. It was a drab fixture. I pretty much watched most of it, and I didn't see any side that deserved to win it. I think the draw was a very decent result for both sides. Crystal Palace are very good defensively. They don't leak a lot of goals, and Nottingham Forest is a very good counter-attacking side. They were always going to try and play a low block, and it seems as though despite whichever competition they face, Nottingham Forest are always going to be a counterattacking side. They really prefer that low block. They love the ability to counterattack, especially when it gets to corner kicks or when it gets to free kicks. That is where their dangerous point is. And with Awani and Callum Hudson-Odoi, they have very fast-paced players who are able to take advantage of any time that the opposition slips up. So this game didn't have much in the way of opportunities, but I do think it was a solid result for both of them, who are going to be aiming to be mid-table sides. Crystal Palace are obviously going to be fine, in my opinion. I think Nottingham Forest are the side who's trying to establish themselves back into the league, and they do want to get a lot more positive results. And this is not a bad result, considering that they're facing an opposition that they would want to get a result against. And then on to Sunday's action, beginning at Brighton, where they welcomed Liverpool, a game that I had predicted to be a 3-2 victory for Liverpool, but it ended up being a 2-2 draw. Now, this game could have actually gone both ways. At the start of the game, it seemed as though Brighton had the measure of Liverpool, but Liverpool have this uncanny ability to stay in games. And when Mo Salah's quick-fire double right before the halfway point gave Liverpool the lead, you kind of could have seen Liverpool going ahead to win this game. And they quite possibly could have if Gravenbach would have turned the ball into the net after a very good cross on from the right-hand side, to which he smashed the post and the ball rebounded back. The game was now finally poised at that point, and Brighton were able to get themselves back in when Lewis Dunk was able to turn in a free kick from the left-hand side. And eventually, they possibly could have won it if João Pedro would have been able to turn in a gilt edge opportunity, which he spurned and hit right over the bar. It was a very entertaining game, and that seems to be what happens whenever Brighton play and whenever Liverpool play. These sides are very, very good at scoring goals. They are very consistent as well. Brighton were the top scorers in the Premier League leading into this game, and so I was not surprised that it was a very entertaining game. As far as where this leaves both sides, I think this leaves them in good stead. Liverpool did not lose to Brighton, and they keep up some pressure on the sides that are above them, and Brighton are still in the conversation for a potential top 4 finish. And as long as they are able to not let games such as Aston Villa happen too often, Brighton will always still stay in contention for any type of top 4 position. Liverpool did show that they still need some solidity in midfield, and that was one of the things that I thought they might suffer from in this game, because Brighton do have a very strong, potent midfield, and it doesn't matter who you plug in there. Brighton have also a very good conveyor belt of youngsters that seem to come in and are able to do the job, which makes them all the more impressive. But I think both sides would be content with a draw. Either side could have won this game. It was a very exhilarating game. and more power to both sides. And then we have West Ham against Newcastle, another game that I had predicted to be a draw, and it did end up being a 2-all draw, just like I called it. The reason being is I thought that West Ham being at home would be able to take chances that come around their way. West Ham are very, very good at home, and they always tend to be very solid in midfield. And I took a look at the squad that they had. West Ham have a very, very good side. Their starting 11 is extremely good. And the quality only dips when you have to bring in somebody, say, for example, if Antonio had an injury, but he was able to overcome that muscular injury. And then there's also good news with Jared Bowen signing this 7-year contract, which is very funny considering that's what Chelsea do all the time. But a lot of people questioned whether is this going to be the pinnacle for him, and only time can tell. But one thing that we can tell is that he has started off the season very well, and his connection with the West Ham fans is very palpable. On the other hand, Newcastle also have some very good news to report for their squad. Bruno Guimaraes has also signed a new contract. There is a very good feeling within the club, especially after their trouncing of PSG in the Champions League and their most recent results, such as Sheffield United's 8-0 thumping away from home. So both sides were coming into this game off of feel-good moments. The thing is that when Newcastle get ahead and they score as many goals as they do, they always seem to triumph. It didn't happen in this game, and West Ham were able to come from behind and draw the game. Kudus, who is a player that Arsenal were interested in, I believe Newcastle were also interested in, came up trumps, and he provided the goal that gave West Ham parity in this game, which I think was a fair result. Newcastle had moments and West Ham had moments. You could argue that the first 20 to 30 minutes of this game was more in the favor of West Ham, but as the game went on, we saw Eddie Howe being able to take control of the midfield. And I do think that Newcastle have one of the most underrated midfields out there. I know Joe Linton is missing right now, but Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes seem to have a very, very good connection between the two of them. And you throw in Joe Linton in there, and you have a very, very strong workman-like midfield, something very reminiscent of what Liverpool were able to do a couple of years ago when Jordan Henderson and co were able to link up very well with this gifted, potent front three. But it remains to be seen whether this type of form is going to continue for Newcastle. I do think that they are still lagging a little bit in some areas, but they can be very happy with their recent showing. And going away to the London Stadium is not an easy thing. And almost winning the game would have been very good for them. But I think a 2-all draw at the end of it all was pretty much the result that this game warranted. And then next we have the Midlands Derby when Wolves were hosting Aston Villa, a game that I predicted Wolves to win 1-0, but ended up being a 1-all draw. This game had a couple of incidences. Lamina got sent off for 2 bookable offenses. They easily could have lost this game. A 1-all draw was probably just for the game. I think that Wolves gave a very good account of themselves after going down to 10 men. Aston Villa are always going to be a problem for any opposition. Their attacking talent is very good, and they also seem to have a very good bench when they have the ability to call on them. So a 1-all draw is just. I think that Wolves are going to take a lot more heart from this. They now have had some very good results, and one thing that I do expect from them is a good showing, because they've been able to do that. They've beaten Manchester City. They were supposed to beat Manchester United, and they've had some very, very good performances over this season. And I think over the course of 38 games, Wolves might be able to survive maybe a little more comfortably than most people had expected them to at the start of the season when they had all these transfers out. Now, if they're able to keep Pedro Neto through January, that's going to be extremely important. We saw them lose Núñez to Manchester City, but they need to keep hold of Pedro Neto if they're going to have any chance of trying to survive this season. And then finally, the smile on my face will tell you that Arsenal were able to end their drought against Manchester City, actually much more than a drought, a 12-game losing streak, by beating them 1-0 at the Emirates Stadium, thanks to Gabby Martinelli's goal in the 86th minute. Now, Arsenal needed this win for much more than just their confidence. This is a way to reestablish themselves mentally as the prime chasers of Manchester City's crown this season. Now, the game was not an easy watch. If you're a tactician, though, you loved seeing everything that went on in this game, because most of the substitutions and the tactical changes in this game were the reason why Arsenal won it. They had a very hazy first 20 minutes of this game. They looked very shaky, and David Raya seemed as though he was being overcome by the occasion, which is understandable because the amount of eyes that were on this game were not the same amount of eyes that he would have had if it was a Brentford-Manchester City game, because the pressure would be off of him, considering that they are not a side that is going to challenge for the title. In this game, he needed to establish himself and to have the confidence to prove that Mikel Arteta made the right decision. And you can tell from Mikel Arteta's post-match comments when he said that he encouraged David Raya to go beyond the noise and the shouts that he was getting from his home fans and actually do what he does best. He was able to keep his composure for the second half, and as such, Arsenal were able to keep a clean sheet against a side that had scored 33 goals with only 5 replies since Pep Guardiola took over. It has been a very terrible record for Arsenal against Manchester City. Some of the problems that Arsenal has had over the seasons past is a slight inferiority complex when it comes to matches against Chelsea or Liverpool, who have beaten Arsenal just as badly as Manchester City have done in the last 10 or so years. So games such as these were very important for Arsenal to now start believing. They have now won at Stamford Bridge on multiple occasions. They've won at Old Trafford. They have won at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And now they have beaten Manchester City, a side who had beaten them 12 games in a row. A very paltry record for a club of the stature of Arsenal. But the fact that they are able to do this, they can now move forward with their season. And when they face Chelsea in the next game, the confidence that they're going to have drawn from this game, and hopefully getting back Bukayo Saka and a fit Martinelli and a fit Partey, should drive them and spur them on to challenge Manchester City, Liverpool, and anybody else who wants the Premier League title. But that's all I got for right now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. For all of you that are newly subscribed, thank you. I appreciate you watching and taking time out of your day to see little old me talk to you about football. Until next time, guys, it's been your boy Izzy. Peace.